could confirm verbally or maybe in the chat window that they can hear me, or maybe if they just see me moving lips and there is no sound, that would also be great. All right. I see people showing thumbs up, which means you can probably hear me, so that's great. Let's just maybe wait for a couple more minutes for other people to join the call, and we'll be starting. Just in case, my name is Pavel Kashanov. I'm your presenter for today, and we're going to be talking about Web of Science and specifically Web of Science researcher profiles. And just in case anyone would not be able to join this call from UTHM, we're going to record this session, and later I'll be able to share it with you and other colleagues that weren't able to make it today. So I think let's start. My name is Pavel Kashanov. Once again, I'm going to be your presenter for today. A few words about myself. I've been with the company for almost 20 years, and more than 15 of these years I've been working with Web of Science and various analytical tools that are based on Web of Science. So what we wanted to do today for UTHM is to conduct another training session based on Web of Science, and from the management of the library, there was such a request that we mostly focus on the topic of researcher profiles today. So let me actually start showing my slides to you. And yeah, this is how I would suggest that we build our conversation today. I'll start with a very brief reminder on what is Web of Science and what is Web of Science core collection specifically. And then we're going to be starting talking about specifically researcher profiles and what exactly we're doing on Web of Science platform to improve your user experience of working with these researcher profiles and promoting your own research and benchmarking yourselves versus other researchers. And then we have access to live interface of Web of Science and Web of Science core collection. And for quite some time, we will be able to play with live researcher profiles data and live Web of Science searches in case any of you would like to do that. So I hope that works for you. In case you're going to be having any questions, please use the chat window to ask them. I might not be able to answer them right away. Just in case the pop-ups won't appear on my Teams window, but I guarantee to you that in the end of my presentation, I'll definitely open the chat window and will be able to answer all the questions that you are going to ask there. So let's start with the Web of Science core collection. Just a brief reminder what it is and why exactly have we gathered here. So Web of Science core collection is one of the key databases in the world that shows this scholarly literature, and not just the records themselves. We also provide you with citation metrics to each of these records that we index. So you probably can name quite a few databases that do the same. So what exactly is it that makes Web of Science and Web of Science core collection stand out? We are probably one of the most selective databases. So I'm going to show you this slide a bit later, but globally there are currently around 100,000 scholarly journals. And out of this 100,000, we only select approximately 20,000 best journals, which we actively index in our database, and we index them cover to cover. And we index every record and every author and every affiliation there. So what we're doing extremely well is we're filtering out the lower quality journals, the ones where the published results might be questionable, where the experiments might not be very transparent and not be very reproducible. And where basically the citations you might not trust. So we keep all these journals outside of the database, and out of all the databases out there, we're doing probably the best job with selecting only the best content. And what we end up in the end is a consistent data set that you can work with really to analyze citations, to compare apples with apples, oranges with oranges, compare researchers, benchmark your own research performance, benchmark your organizational research performance versus peers and competitors. So there's a lot of things that you can do there. And once again, just to highlight why exactly we're doing this and how we're doing this selection. First of all, we're publisher neutral. So Clarivate is not a publisher. We don't have any of our journals published, unlike some other organizations. And therefore, whenever we receive a request from any journal that they would like to pass the evaluation and start having their journal indexed on Web of Science, we treat absolutely all publishers equally. It can be a large reputable publisher, it can be a small publisher that nobody has heard of, it can be an association publisher, it can be a university publisher. All of the journals we treat equally. All we care is whether or not they meet our selection criteria, our quality criteria to be included into the database. And all of the people that are selecting this top content for our database, all of them are Clarivate employees without any conflicts of interest. So they don't have, they are not members of any editorial boards outside of Clarivate in any journals. So all they're doing is they're subject matter experts that select the journals and the conferences and the books in their subject area, so that the content that you see on Web of Science core collection is really the top quality, and you can trust the data that you see there. And this is the slide I was promising to show today. So as I already mentioned, there are more and more journals appearing out there every year. And more, specifically after the open access movement has started its active expansion, we see that a lot of the journals are actually predatory open access journals. So I'm pretty sure you've heard a lot of things about predatory open access journals. And if there's going to be any questions today about those, we're also happy to talk about them. Now, those are the journals that that are, first of all, of gold open access model. It's where the author pays for the article processing charges, and that there are reputable and legitimate open access journals, which you probably know very well, that still keep their double-blind peer review process. But there are certain journals which are still open access that either simplify the peer review process to basic formalities or just completely remove it and basically publish any rubbish as long as the author pays. So it's out of question that we don't want any of these journals in Web of Science core collection. And what we're doing extremely well is we're keeping those journals outside of there by introducing all the selection criteria that we have, which I was just talking about. On top of that, well, maybe as users of Web of Science, you might not be particularly interested in this, but let me very briefly run through this, and then we'll jump, I promise you, directly into the researcher profiles. So we have a lot of other processes and workflows that ensure the quality of the metadata inside of the Web of Science core collection. So first of all, we track all the cited references for all records going back to the year 1900. So we track the references to, and I've just checked that recently. We have a lot of references going even to the pointing to the records that were published in the 9th, 10th century. So there are a lot of them, and we capture each of these cited references, and that's how we basically count the citations to the records that are included into the Web of Science. we capture all the author names, and this is going to be very important for capturing the correct researcher profiles. So we're going to be talking about that. And specifically for every researcher, we also capture every affiliation if it was provided on the original document. And we capture funding data. We standardize the author affiliations so that UTHM has a single preferred name, and regardless of the name of UTHM, it might be an abbreviation, it might be the full name, it might be one of the previous names that UTHM had before. Whenever any user in the world types the word UTHM and tries to find all the records associated with your affiliation, each of them finds exactly the correct and exactly the same number. And we index, as I already mentioned, cover to cover. So if we state that we index a specific journal, we index all of the materials that are published there, starting from page 1 and ending with the last page. We don't have any missing content there, again, unlike other databases. And the database is updated daily. So that means that every day you log into Web of Science, you see the updated figures for the number of publications and number of citations. And the use cases for Web of Science, there's just a lot of them. So you can run a topical search. Probably it's the most important one for the researchers, to run a topical search to see what's being published right now on your particular topic. Find not just all the papers that are dedicated to your topic, but the most cited ones, which means the most impactful, the most important one. Read through them, understand the citation links between them and the citing records, and what exactly is it in the most important records related to your field that is cited by the subsequent generations of researchers. You can find potential collaborators, meaning authors who are working in the same subject area and the same topics as you do. So you can even find their contacts on Web of Science and reach out to them to really discuss any questions related to your research, and maybe that can be a trigger to a potential partnership or even a joint research project in the future. You can search for the journals which are most relevant to your subject area and compare them by their citation metrics, finding out the most prestigious journals where maybe to publish your research outputs. And because we also index funding data, you can also look for funding agencies that were funding specific research previously. And if they were funded previously, maybe they have similar open programs right now. So you can go there to these funders' websites and check if they have any grants that are available right now, so you can submit your funding application there. So Web of Science is actually also a way of earning grant money for the research. So yeah, if I just go through the Web of Science use cases, I think we can talk for another half an hour easily. So if there's going to be an interest in this, we can always get back to this. But yeah, let's get back to the key topic of our conversation today, which is Web of Science researcher profiles and why exactly we're doing that. So let's start with a macro view of the challenges that we believe you and other institutions face when managing their research priorities. So in an ideal world, the vast majority of the researcher time should be spent, of course, on research activity. That is building research proposals, evaluating research trends, conducting the field work, and disseminating results. Unfortunately, we know that reality doesn't align with this ideal. Our research, as some of you might know, we also own a company named Ex Libris. So a few years ago, they partnered with another company named Ultraline, and they conducted a brief research where they were asking researchers about key challenges and how they spend their working time. And this research showed that the majority of them, almost 2/3 of these researchers, spend a quarter of their time on administrative tasks. That means reporting, tracking, and collecting data of their activities. So this fact is perpetuated by the myriad different platforms and tools, which are, as you probably know, almost often siloed and duplicated, and the researchers need to engage with these platforms in order to meet various demands. And that may be showcasing their work to their peers, establishing collaborations, and remaining informed on the development in your basically research field. So a fifth of the researchers also reported to having that they had to maintain at least 5 different profiles across different systems. So this actually sounds even ridiculous, that all the systems that are designed to make your life as researchers easier, if it's starting to become too many of them, they're actually becoming your time consumers rather than facilitators of your job activities. And this problem is not only getting worse, and increasingly that burden is also falling on the institution. So between the years 2021 and 2022, we also saw a drop in the number of institutions reporting that their research portals were up to date. And we also noticed a significant drop in the researchers themselves reporting that their profile was up to date. So this results puts more pressure on the research office normally. Sometimes this function sits with the library of the university, but sometimes, in majority of cases, it sits with the research office. It puts more pressure on them to manually track and update research activity, and it also restricts the accuracy and efficiency of relying on that data to drive for the decision making and reporting against the effective research strategy. So as researchers and maybe research leaders, if anybody of them joined the call, so in your respective organization, I doubt this information comes as much surprise. So now we're going to take a look at in which ways Web of Science is positioning itself to assist you in alleviating these pressures and making it much easier to keep the track of your own activities or your faculty activities and embed that data seamlessly into your systems to reduce effort and duplication. So let's take a look at Web of Science researcher profile. So what exactly that is. A Web of Science researcher profile is automatically created for every author indexed in the Web of Science core collection. So this is a very important thing. Maybe just if we had this conversation 3 years ago, we would still be in a position to say that not each of the authors has their researcher profile, only the ones that have logged in and confirmed and claimed their authorship of their records. But to date, it's basically every researcher that's indexed in the Web of Science core collection, they do have their profile and they do have their unique researcher ID. So today that amounts to over 35 million profiles spanning all the globe, all countries, and all research disciplines. So using AI, so we have a neural network working there. We compare any given authorship on a paper to another and amalgamate those who we believe to be authored by the same person into a single record, which basically then provides an overview of their collective works and their impact. These profiles, and we added this feature just a couple of years ago, they can be searched independently, or you can also navigate to those profiles by just clicking the name of the author in document record. If you need a reminder of how that can be done, we can totally jump onto the live Web of Science interface and check that. So records can also be corrected literally by anyone with a Web of Science account. So there is a correction wizard that can help with that. And profiles themselves can also be claimed by the researchers themselves. So it provides a lot of benefits to you because you can expand the times of the content that can be showcased and also elevate the researcher experience in Web of Science more generally, which I'll elaborate a bit on later. So all of this is a result of the integration with the company named Pablons a few years ago, and all profiles are now visible within one product space, and they have unique research ready, so it can be viewed publicly, even by people without a Web of Science subscription. So once again, it's very important. If you even don't have a Web of Science subscription, you can't use the document search on Web of Science, but you can still log onto Web of Science platform to browse the researcher profiles and even take a look at what kind of researcher profile you currently have. So let's take a bit closer look at the profile itself. So starting at the top, claiming a profile enables the researcher to personalize the displays of the elements about themselves, such as first of all, their preferred name, and that's really important, specifically to somebody who might have changed the name during their career. It's also your organizational history, because today you're working in UTHM, tomorrow you're going to maybe Harvard University for a short-term assignment, and the policy of Harvard University is that regardless of what's said in your labor contract with your main organization, if you just came for 2 weeks to Harvard University and you conducted the research there with their lab equipment and in their facilities, it is absolute must that you put their affiliation. It can be like one of the affiliations, but it is a must that you put their affiliation on the paper. So if you have a variety, and maybe tomorrow you just go to another place in Malaysia or outside of Malaysia, and you start working there for like a longer term. So a lot of researchers, they have a variety of organizational affiliations in their history, and we also keep track of that. We also keep track of certain awards that you have received, so such as Highly Cited Researcher Award, which, by the way, is going to live, if I'm not mistaken, today. So yeah, if there are going to be any questions about the Highly Cited Researcher Awards, we're happy to talk about that as well. And finally, a link to the ORCID account. So we might a bit later talk more about ORCID. So just in case, we have a researcher ID, which is the internal identifier for researcher within the Web of Science core collection or within Web of Science, and this ID was the first ID to create it back in the year 2008 by us, and because researcher ID is an ID that belongs to a commercial product, we also anticipated certain skepticism in the research community when we're just launching that. And we were also the founders of the ORCID ID, which is a non-commercial initiative. And we're also like one of the people who came up with the idea to actually create this non-commercial ORCID ID. So we still keep partnering with them. And because ORCID is much more flexible in terms of the number of databases with which it can be integrated and with which it works, we really respect them for that. And you can seamlessly link your researcher profile to your ORCID account. So a bit later, I'll be talking about it much more, how exactly this can be done. So we aim here to balance between the user-generated content to ensure the accurate representation of the researcher and specifically as they want to be seen. And on the other hand, verified publisher data to ensure that anyone viewing the record can have the confidence in the accuracy and validity of the data they're viewing. So claiming a profile also gives increased control of the content types that can be included. That basically gives a greater overview of the scholarly contribution that goes beyond article publication. And those profiles are no longer limited to only Web of Science core collection publications. Let me repeat that. So previously, again, just 3 years ago, you could only claim the records that were on the Web of Science core collection. As for now, you can also claim the documents that might exist on other databases on the Web of Science platform, or you can even add manually documents that are not indexed on the Web of Science core collection, and they're just going to be hanging there as documents without citation metrics, because obviously we don't have any place to capture the citation metrics for non-indexed publications, but you still can add this information there. So the researcher, just bottom line, can manually add non-indexed articles. And we do have a deep workflow integrations with publishers and journals. You can even add peer reviews. So those can be automatically verified and logged to the profiles without the need of manual intervention or effort. So if you remember this Publon service that I referred to, we basically own the producers of this service. And because they have these integrations with the peer review systems of a lot of publishers, in case there were any confirmed peer reviews that you did for reputable journals, you can also automatically add this data to your researcher profile on Web of Science. We also automatically add preprints from our new preprint citation index. And we also most recently, we enabled researchers to claim and connect their profile to their dissertations that are part of ProQuest dissertation and thesis index. So let me probably elaborate here what we mean by that. At the moment, all the existing subscribers of the Web of Science core collection, they also receive access to the preprint citation index, which we find a very good addition to the Web of Science core collection, just because in certain areas, a lot of scholarly knowledge, it has been announced even before it is formally published in the scholarly journals. So the preprint archives such as archive.org or bioarchive or chemarchive or whatever you can name them, they are very popular among researchers in specific subject areas. So the top of these preprint archives, we index them in a separate database outside of Web of Science core collection, but it's also available to you on the Web of Science platform. You can just select which database you want to search. Web of Science core collection, preprint citation index, or both of them. And as researchers, you can also claim any preprints that you might have published on any of these famous archives. You can also link them to your researcher profile. And this ProQuest dissertation and thesis index is also a database that we've launched this year. It's also freely available to all the Web of Science subscribers. So basically, it's all about the dissertations and thesis content. And if you have any of your dissertations or thesis indexed in that database, you can also claim that on your researcher profile. So we continue to work on adding more content types, and over the next few years, we're also going to be adding the awarded grants from our grants index that basically allows researchers to showcase their success in securing funding even before research outputs related to that funding have been published. What's next? Leveraging that comprehensive data that we index about all these outputs, we then provide means for researchers and institutions to evaluate the content of the profile in the contextual and responsible ways, be that to showcase your own impact as a researcher or evaluate the relevance of someone's other work and can compare that to your own or to support promotion, tenure, or funding decisions. So alongside traditional citation analysis, we also launched a very interesting visualization called Author Impact Beam Plots in 2019. And that normalizes citation performance by year of publication and subject category. So it provides like a graphical representation of citation performance over an entire career, not just a single point metric like the H index does, for example. So this is, by the way, a very important conversation that we're currently having with a lot of researchers globally. And you might actually be surprised if I say this. So when we are talking to professional bibliometricians, so the people who basically earn their payroll for conducting bibliometric research, and that they publish their own papers in bibliometrics. So these people deal with research evaluation and bibliometric research and citation analysis globally. A lot of them will say that H index as an indicator for the last 5 years, it's already dead. So I'll repeat this. Professionals in research performance evaluation, professionals in bibliometric research, they don't use H index any longer as a value of researcher importance or researcher impact. Now, why exactly this happens? H index is a single dimensional way to take a look at least two-dimensional problem. What are we trying to analyze with various bibliometric indicators? We're trying to analyze the researcher's research output or the research activity based on their number of papers they published. And we also try to analyze their research impact or their authoritativeness using the citation indicators. So what H-index does is it mixes the two into a single metric providing one indicator that is supposed to help us to understand whether a researcher is good. But the problem is that by simplifying this to just one number, we're simplifying the problem so much that we might not be able to tell a lot of really important things about researchers by just taking a look at their H-index. So, for example, if I ask you an H-index of 10, is it a lot or is it not a lot? And there's no correct answer for this, because in certain subject areas, an H-index of 10, like in subject areas, for example, in history, in urban sciences, in religious studies, that is a lot. That is a huge number, just because these subject areas that I just named, they tend, or archaeology, for example, on top of that, in these subject areas, people don't really publish a lot of scholarly articles. They might publish books. Books are also indexed by Web of Science core collection. And they don't receive a lot of citations, not because their research outputs are not important, but just because the nature of disseminating research results in these subject areas, it doesn't suppose a lot of huge publication activity, and it doesn't suppose a lot of references to other people, and doesn't suppose a lot of citations. So an average researcher in archaeology, in history, in philosophy, and religious studies, they don't accumulate as many citations over years as, for example, researchers in the field of oncology, genetics, molecular biology, etc. So if we take a look at those researchers, they probably should have so many papers published and so many citations by the time they spend 10 years in research, that the H-index of 10 would probably not be a very impressive metric for them. So let's wrap this up. H-index doesn't really have any standardized benchmarks across subject areas. So how much of an H-index you should have by your researcher age of X to consider yourself a reputable researcher? Well, there was more or less of consensus in physics that for every year in science spent in science, your H-index should be increasing by 1. But that's physics, and there is no benchmark for that in biological sciences. There's no benchmark for that in social science or humanities. And physics also can be different. There's physics of particles and fluids, for example. Excuse me, there's particle physics, where normally your citation counts are growing very rapidly. And there are less cited branches of physics, like mathematical physics, like applied physics, where you just accumulate citation counts much slower. So even in physics, the consensus that for every year spent in science, your H-index should grow by 1 is actually not true. And the other thing is, just by looking at the H-index, you can never tell whether or not the researcher is active now. So you have to take a look at, do they publish any papers recently or not? And if they do, they probably are still active, but you can't tell that by just taking a look at their H-index. So the bottom line is, in my recent 7 years in bibliometrics, I only had to use H-index twice. Both of them were really high-level reports that I only used to pick like a dozen of best researchers in a subject area, and I could really sacrifice certain precision there. So I didn't really require a lot of precision in my evaluation, and had just come up indicatively with 5 to 10 best names in specific topics. That's what H-index probably still works for. But if you take important decision about promotion, tenure, and funding, H-index will definitely not be enough for that. And that's exactly, so why exactly I'm talking about that for so long. Our author impact beam plots are the response to that declining H-index paradigm. So we really encourage you to take a look at author impact beam plots, understand how to read and interpret the data there, and in a few days after you start doing that, I can guarantee to you that you will be able to compare researchers by their author impact beam plots, as the CV. So we'll definitely take a look at the beam plot in the next few slides. The users can also in researcher profiles, they can explore the content by author position and also co-author networks. And we recently introduced one more exciting indicator, which is citations from patents, which I personally like a lot because, well, maybe it's not used as much in research performance evaluation, and it's not used at all, let me be completely frank with you, in university rankings. But citations from patents is actually a great metric of technological influence. So if your university, if UTHM thinks about commercializing your research, with researcher profiles, you can currently take a look at which of your researchers, who are your researchers that get cited by patents the most, meaning their research influences innovation in certain subject areas. So that is exploring these citations between patent documents and scholarly documents is actually a great way to finding this and exploring this missing link between research and commercializing research, or between research and innovation. So now you can check all these metrics specifically on the research profiles, and I encourage you to do so. Should the viewers want to delve deeper, the metrics dashboard can be expanded to give further representation of this data. So I appreciate this size of the slide might not be super nice for that, but this is basically what the author impact beam plot looks. So you can see right here in the center of the screen, this is the author impact beam plot, and now I'm going to be demonstrating, I'm going to be running a live demonstration of the researcher profiles to you. I'm going to show you this author impact beam plot and how exactly it can be read. So such as annual and geographic citation distributions, the peer review activity, you can see there trends and length. So all of this gives viewers bigger and more contextual pictures of research output, basically without a need for manual intervention and complex data crunching. All of this is also provided by, supported by the profile CV download, making it very easy to export and submit as part of annual research reviews, for example. Now, when you have your profiles claimed, you can also have access to this on your landing page for Web of Science. So earlier I mentioned that owning researcher profile is also beneficial for elevating researchers' experience right on Web of Science, or user experience on the Web of Science platform. So leveraging this connection between a Web of Science user and their research outputs, we can generate all these things, which include automatic alerts every time your work is cited and by whom. So you can set up these alerts, and each time you receive a new citation, you get an email confirming that. The next, it's personalized content recommendation to help you stay ahead of newly indexed content. So it can come up with recommendations on your previous searches, on your publication history. So it basically comes up with recommendations that it supposes are going to be interesting for you. And even personalized event recommendations specific to your field of research that help you to plan your academic diary. This also comes as a part of the integration with Pivot RP. That's another tool that we're producing. It's probably outside of the today's presentation topic, but if there's going to be any questions about specifically Pivot RP, maybe I'll also be able to answer them. So all of this is visible to the user when they log into Web of Science as part of their personalized dashboards. And that gives each of users direct access into things like editing your profile, list your recent searches and browse them, and content recommendations, enabling you to step back into your research with minimal effort. So we listen carefully, our product development team, it listens carefully to our users, and we're really mindful not to direct this strategy into more social-like features to make sure that we keep the needs of the research workflow close to its core. Yeah, and this is a very interesting citation that we found out there. Ultimately, our goal is to provide the researchers to a platform in which they can prioritize the most important things to them and enable them to focus their time as much as possible on the activities that bring value to the research lifecycle. So owning a researcher profile should not be seen as something only required of them to fulfill the administrative tasks, which inevitably leads to being out of date and neglected, but as something that can help shift time back to what matters most. And that's obviously doing research, conducting research. So having a presence in Web of Science represented by your researcher ID means you can largely forget about having it to track the activity manually, as we hear about in Excel spreadsheets, CVs, and multiple profile platforms, and get value back from that profile by having it inform you how you discover the new content and stay on top of the ever-growing research space. Now let's talk about ORCID integration. I really wanted to mention this integration point. We really prioritize basically in order to further streamline research office activities. So we know the importance of ORCID in the academic landscape for the first of all, disambiguation of the authors and the adherence to funding and open access policies. And we're proud, therefore, that we offer the deepest available integration with ORCID in our Web of Science researcher profiles. So we leverage ORCID in a number of ways, both in the processing the article content and the researcher data. ORCIDs are indexed whenever it is present on the article's metadata. So in case you publish a paper and you mention your ORCID on this paper, it's going to appear on Web of Science automatically. So no additional actions are required for that. And we take a direct feed of author to article information every day from ORCID itself to ensure that that we capture and represent the ORCIDs within our content very accurately. So we also use this data to help inform our profile disambiguation, but going further, we also enable researchers to seamlessly keep both Web of Science and ORCID profiles synchronized by a couple of simple steps. So once configured, the users can push the changes made in either platform. Excuse me, I mean it's either Web of Science or ORCID, meaning they can significantly reduce the effort to keep whichever profile is necessary for a given application up to date. So basically, you can either push the updates from Web of Science researcher profile into ORCID, or you can pull the data once they're integrated from your ORCID profile back into the Web of Science. So I think this is really important and really simple, and that saves you a lot of time. So instead of having two interfaces for keeping two of your IDs up to date, you can actually do that from one. And which of them it's going to be, ORCID itself or Web of Science platform, you can basically decide which of them you would like to choose. So this can be set by the profile setting page. So user just has to log in, go to settings, and then the ORCID syncing tab, and then authenticate via ORCID to forge a connection between the two accounts. And then you can configure how you want to sync, either one way or both, and you can pause the sync at any time if you wish. So for example, if there is any error that has happened, for example, on ORCID side, and you don't want this error to be introduced on your Web of Science researcher profile, you can also put this integration to pause, or vice versa. Cool. Let's move next. Let's move on. So to summarize what we've covered so far, the researcher profiles are designed to support you as researchers and the institutions to simplify and trust the researcher data that is critical to the research lifecycle. So we aim to save time by, first of all, instantly disambiguating all the authors as they are indexed as part of any article in the Web of Science core collection. Also by enabling researchers at all stages of their career to present the fullest picture of their previous research output beyond on the article publication, as we already mentioned. By making the most of the workflows automatic, from really auto-adding of articles and preprints to the deep integration of the peer review workflows so that they're completely hands-off. and by syncing with other important identifiers like ORCID to support open access and funding strategy. So we also aim to build expertise by enabling you as researchers to show your awards, export your CV, and share your profile widely by providing personalized alerts with relevant information, like, for example, if your paper just got cited or if there's any search, any new paper that might actually be interesting for you, you can also receive those alerts. And finally, by helping to build skills and enabling researchers to express interest with journals they wish to review for, write open peer reviewers for published work to showcase your expertise. And finally, we aim to enable trusted and responsible analytics. Like I've just been talking for quite a while about age index versus author impact beam plots. So the cornerstone of these analytics is comprehensive indicators that go beyond citation, like citation from patents or peer review activity, that contextualize data that enable fair benchmarking and comparison. Again, we'll take a look at author impact beam plots, so we'll talk about that. And data that can be integrated and applied across multiple platforms, including systems like insights benchmarking and analytics. So on top of the researcher profiles, we also offer so-called Web of Science Researcher API. This Researcher API normally supposes additional subscription to it, but in certain cases, in case you'll be interested to learn more about the Researcher API and how the researcher metadata can be integrated into your own systems, like if you have any internal research evaluation dashboard, we can certainly talk about that, but that probably will require a separate session. So we've been talking for like 45 minutes already. Thank you so much. I will jump into the live Web of Science demonstration right now, into live Web of Science interface, so that we can take a look at these researcher profiles more precisely. And once again, I will encourage you to ask your questions in the chat window in case you have any. So this is basically what Web of Science interface currently looks like. So to get into the researcher profiles, I'll just switch to the advanced search. And here we have a document search, the feature that's only available for the existing Web of Science subscriber. But this tab is available even for non-subscribing organizations. So you can just go to the researchers and find them by last name and first name. Now I can also search by the organization. So let's try to search for all of the researchers that are affiliated with UTHM. And we've got at least 3,600 basically researcher profiles. And as you can see, we can first of all, just like with Web of Science document search, we see the search results on the right-hand side of the page. And on the left-hand side of the page, we have some filters, so we can take a look at which of the researcher profiles are claimed, which are not claimed by the researchers. We can see the breakdown by subject areas. We can see which affiliations are associated with these researchers, and some of them, the majority of them, obviously is going to be UTHM and different name variants for UTHM, but some of them are going to be other organizations, so there might be like secondary affiliations for these researchers. And we can also see the breakdown by countries. So if we take a closer look at the researcher profiles themselves, we can see that the top ones are marked with these green ticks. So to be frank with you, I'm actually walking on thin ice right now because I haven't been playing with these profiles before this session. So let me actually just jump into the first profile to see what exactly we're going to see there. So what exactly this green tick means? That means that Mustafa Mohammed has logged into the profile themselves and claimed the authorship of all of these publications, 445 publications. And what exactly we can see on their profile? They can even upload their picture here. But what we see is their Web of Science research identifier, which is researcher ID, their ORCID, which is a hyperlink. And if I click that one, I'm basically going to be dragged into their ORCID profile. So there's not a lot of public information available on Mohammed Mustafa. but yeah, still this ORCID ID exists. We can see their list of published names, and it's quite a lot of those. And so what exactly is going on here? In certain records, I'm assuming that's he was mentioned as Mustafa K. Mohammed. In certain records, he was mentioned as just Mustafa Mohammed. Somewhere it was M.K. Mohammed, etc. So there's just so many name variants for this researcher. And once again, we use the AI to generate the algorithmically generated record, but then he also logged into to confirm that, yes, I'm a live human. Those are all my papers. We can also see the research affiliations. So basically, the main affiliation is UTHM, and even some of the name variants. But there's also like a National Research Center, University of Rochester, and UAE University. So there's quite a number of the organizations that this researcher is or was affiliated in the future. We can't tell exactly which is the most current research affiliation, because all we see is the affiliations on the documents, and maybe the researcher can just very quickly move to a new organization and start publishing documents with its affiliation, or they can go to temporary project to another org and publish document with them. And all we're going to see is that the recent affiliation might have slightly changed. So this is our best guess to tell you which is their most recent affiliations, but we don't have access to their like labor contracts, so we can't say which exact organization this particular researcher is currently employed with. And we can see in which subject areas this researcher works. So it's all of this. Now, below that, we see the list of the documents, and we can choose either we want to see the documents that are only indexed in the Web of Science core collection, or we can see all those that, so some of them might not even be indexed in the core collection, but that's just one of them that is not that is indexed outside of the Web of Science core collection. And below that, we can see the list of these documents, which we can also sort by date or by citation, so we can scroll between them. We can see, for example, we can leave only the documents where this author was first, last, or corresponding author, meaning those are the papers, those are the research projects in which this particular author has made the most significant impact. And we can generate their CV, so we can export it's in the CV, in FECIT format, all the documents from their profile. Now, what else we can do with this? We can see the metrics on the right-hand side. So we can see that this researcher has 445 publications that are specifically in the core collection, and that only document that is not in the core collection is actually a preprint, which comes from our preprint citation index that I was talking about in the beginning of our conversation. Is there a way to access that one? Yes, obviously we can go to the preprint citation index and see their documents there. We can also see that the H index for this researcher is 50, which is, I would say, it's a significant number in any subject area. And we can see the other metrics, like the sum of the times cited, the number of the citing articles, and the patent count. So at least by 9 patent families, their previous publications were cited, which is, again, an indicator of this technological influence. So I get a lot of questions at this stage as to why the number of citing articles is less than the total time cited, and the answer is quite simple, because any citing articles can cite 2 or more documents from the base data set. So that's why the number of citing article is normally slightly less than the sum of the times cited. And there's always a question like, which one should we use just to understand the citation of this researcher? Obviously, I would encourage you to use the left one. The right one is more like a hyperlink, which can take you to the set of the citing papers if you want to analyze which particular papers reference this author. And if you have access to our patent database called Derwent Innovations Index, this number is also going to be clickable for you. So if you then go to the citing patents, you can even see which inventions. Cite this researcher, who are their assignee names, who owns these patents, who were the inventors of this intellectual property, and even get some ideas about what these patent descriptions are. But again, patent analysis is probably a bit away of today's conversation's topic, so let's focus on the metrics that we see. I can actually open, so this button right here will take us to the citation report for this author. Now, citation report is basically a feature on Web of Science that you can build for any number of articles under 10,000, which gives you all of these metrics. Once again, we've seen basically all of them, but here we get introduced some more of the metrics, like number of citing articles without self-citations and total number of citations without self-cites. And you also see the average citations per item. That's basically the number of times cited divided by the number of publications. So on average, the papers of this researcher were published 55.97 times, which is also, I would say, quite high, but it's very hard to compare those versus any benchmark. So we don't have a benchmark for that. On the benchmarks, they depend on the subject area, publication year, and also document type. So we can't really just looking at this number say, so we can probably say that 55.97 is quite a high number, but we can't measure how exactly high that number is. Now, the good news is that we do have a metric that will allow us to address that, and I'll show it to you in the future. We can also see their report on the number of documents. Those are the columns right here, and the number of citations that the previously published papers of this researcher have been received year over year, and this is the blue line. And finally, we have the breakdown of all the records by the citations and how many citations that those records were received in specific years. So there's a whole table right beneath here. So it's a lot to explore here. But let me get back to the researcher profile. Now, the thing that I really wanted to show you is the dashboard for this researcher. So here we can once again see some of the metrics that we've just seen in the researcher profile. We see exactly the same time cited in publications over time that we were just taking a look at. But then let's take a look at the author impact beam plot, and that's, I believe, a really important feature that allows us to compare researchers with one another. So what exactly do we see here? Once again, as I mentioned to you, this is our response to an H-index. We're pretty sure that H-index has a lot of its statistical inconsistencies. It's probably maybe a bit overrated as an indicator and oversimplified. And sometimes when we need much more context to understand, is the researcher currently active, and do they publish better, more cited research in the recent years than they were publishing before? And author impact beam plot is exactly the thing we should take a look at. So first of all, let me switch from recent 10 years to the full career of this researcher. And this is what we see for their full career. It's actually quite long, because the first record indexed by this researcher, it came from year 1985. So what exactly we see here? Each of the dots on the graph represents their one specific Web of Science document. And you're free to go into your researcher profile and take a look at your particular author impact beam plot. You can just name them beam plots, so that's the keyword, but the full name is author impact beam plot. So what exactly we see here? Each of the dots is the individual document, and we can even hover our mouse about it and see what exactly is going on there and what is the name of this document. And as you can see, we can see the percentile. And what exactly that percentile means is for every subject area, for every year, and for every document type, we just range the documents from the least cited to the most cited. And the higher the percentile is, the more the document was actually cited compared to the other documents published in the same year and in the same subject area and of the same document time. So this is where we compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges, not the other way around. So the way this graph should be read is the more to the right an individual dot is located, the better it was cited compared to the relevant sub-data set. So let me give you an example. This paper published by this researcher in year 2014 only received 2 citations, okay? Oops, I shouldn't have clicked that, sorry. Let's just open it once again. And the full career. So we were talking about the year 2014. We see that this particular record received 2 citations, and it has fallen into only 8th percentile. So that means that 8% of other documents published in microbiology in 2014 received less citations than this particular record. Well, obviously, that's quite an easy thing because this document has received only 2 citations. And on contrast, this document that received 537 citations, sorry, it just goes away as I'm moving my hover away from it. But the point I'm trying to make is that with 537 citations, this document is actually in the 100th percentile. So it's really in 1% of the most cited records in its subject area. And that's really a really important paper. So the more documents you have on the right-hand side of this author impact beam plot, the better. And in this case, we're really comparing the citations within the subject area and within the particular publication year and even within the document type, so that we compare like with the like. And on top of that, you can see some other entities here on the graph, which are these green circles. What exactly they mean? Those are medians. So those are median percentile for each of the year. Now, why exactly this matters? We have median for each of the year of the researcher's career. And if you see that over years, like here, for example, it's very easy to see in the period between 1992 and 2000. Every next year, this researcher was publishing better outputs, and we can track that on their median. So the median for every year was going more and more to the right. That means that this researcher's career was really on the rise at that time. So every next paper that they produced was more and more important, more and more impactful than the previous ones. And that's how we can read that this is really the best probably time in their career. Now, then it has stabilized, and the researcher publishes both highly cited documents and lower cited documents. And yeah, if you see that the dots here are like skewed or stretched, that means that there are 2 or more documents that are falling into the same percentile. So there were 3 publications in the 0th percentile of this researcher for the year 2020. And on top of these green circles that represent the median for a given year, we can also see this dotted line that represents the median for the whole career of this researcher, which is somewhere around 58th percentile. Now, once again, I think I'll anticipate the question: what is the average percentile in the world? And I think some of you might be inclined to say that it should be somewhere around 50, but because the average percentile here is not really calculated as an average mean, not as the arithmetic mean, but rather as harmonic mean, it actually should be slightly lower. So because the data set is slightly skewed into the more papers that received fewer or no citations at all, the approximate average number of the citations median for the whole career should be somewhere around 33rd, 35th percentile. So everything that's above there is already better than the world average. So this is quite a good example. And we can also judge from that recently the researcher is still publishing a lot of papers, actually very much papers every year, which is which is a good sign, I would say. But sometimes you would find people that, for example, have a huge H index, but in the recent few years, you find that there's no spots at all in their career. So that would mean that they haven't been publishing a single record. And when you take a look at this beam plot, if we go into another profile, like the next researcher in UTHM, and take a look at their author impact beam plot, we can just start comparing the researchers with one another. So we can also say that, okay, the median percentile for the whole career of this researcher is 49th, which is still very good. We can see that they still keep publishing a lot of papers, a lot of which get cited a lot, some of which are not cited or not cited maybe too much, but still this is quite a good and healthy author impact beam plot. And maybe for the research office, for the library, in case this functions is going to sit with library for recruitment purposes, you might actually want to look out for the researchers who demonstrate this activity in the recent few years. So if you see that each next of their papers year over year is cited more and more, so that these green circles are going from left to right over years, that means you're seeing a researcher that is in a rising part of their career, which is really good. Right, I hope this explains a few things about the author impact beam plots. Now, if any of you would be interested, we even have a few papers right in Web of Science that explain this author impact beam plots, and we as a company were also published a number of white papers and reports that explain the value of the author impact beam plots. So again, we can even have a separate session just dedicated to author impact beam plots, but really this is our answer to oversimplified H index that gives you a full idea of what is going on with the researcher's career right now. And just in case you want to study this on your own at some point, so this is the section on how to read the beam plot and what exactly it means. And finally, we have the geographic citation map. So that's like the breakdown of the citations that came to this researcher, broken down by specific countries. And you can see like from which countries or even from which cities your research is being cited. So you can zoom in, you can zoom out on this map and look like that. Because this researcher has also some verified peer reviews, we also have the peer reviewed metrics that this researcher had 44 verified peer reviews. In the last 2 months, there were 2 of them, and this is the ratio of peer review to publication. And you can see that the median is not 0.3 to 1. I wouldn't say that this means that this researcher doesn't do a good job with the peer reviewing, but yeah, you can also like take a look at what's the median in your subject area and try to understand. Maybe you should be doing it more frequently if you want it, if you have the bandwidth, or maybe you just doing it too much, as in certain cases. You can also see some infographics about the peer reviews, how frequently they are, what's the average peer review length, and even some of the metrics from the Derwent Innovations Index. So once again, in certain cases, this will require a subscription to Derwent Innovations Index, but here at least we can see this subject category breakdown for citing patterns, which of them come from chemistry, which of them come from material science, engineering, etc. And finally, here in the bottom, we see the breakdown of the author's position. So like I already mentioned, if the researcher was first, last, or corresponding in a particular record, that means that they've provided the major involvement into the specific research. If those researcher profiles are interesting to you, we also come with suggestions that you might also be interested in these researcher profiles because they work in a similar subject area but in different in different geographies, and you can see the co-authors of this particular researcher specifically on their profile. So this is how you can compare them. Just in case you are you're running any topical search on Web of Science, something like I don't know, cubical satellites. If we run a topical search on cubical satellites, we first of all see the researcher profiles on the left-hand side of the search window, so we can see what are the researchers that are working most actively on a specific topic. So if we run a search on cubical satellites, we can be sure that these are the researchers that are most active in this field. So if I'm doing research on cubical satellites, I'll probably be reading their papers. I'll probably know that those are the rock stars in my subject area. And if I manage to meet one of those at a conference, I will definitely try to have my chance to come to them and talk about their research and my research, just in case we might find any overlaps. And in case we're interested in going to a specific researcher profile, we can of course click this name on the left-hand side of the Analyze tab, or we can just go to an individual paper, and if we see a particular researcher here, we can click their name and go into their profile. And this is quite an interesting, it's good that I've actually came into this profile, because as you can see, it's not having a green tick mark alongside of it. And that means that this particular researcher profile, actually that consists of only one publication, it was generated algorithmically. So Valerio Bocci from probably some institute in Rome in Italy, they will still need to log onto Web of Science and to claim this record, so that it's also being shown on their researcher profiles as a verified one. I hope this makes sense. So let's wrap up what we've just discussed today. We've created these researcher profiles on Web of Science. First of all, to save your time and help you to disambiguate your papers, to broaden your outputs, sync with other systems like ORCID, and make sure that the updates from one system go into another. Or we created them to help you build your expertise and showcase your research output and any peer reviews that you've done. And finally, to create analytics that allows you to benchmark yourselves versus peers and competitors, that allows the university research office or library to compare the researchers with one another. And all of this impact is contextualized so that you can even draw conclusions on whether the researcher's career is currently rapidly developing, or vice versa, it's on decline in the recent few years. A particular researcher hasn't been published a lot of research outputs. So thank you very much for your attention today. That's really all that we wanted to discuss. As promised, I wanted to go into the chat window and just see what questions there are there. So if you want to ask your questions, please still feel free to put them in the chat window. I currently see only one question there, which is, if we link ORCID and the Web of Science researcher profile, will our peer review be automatically updated in researcher ID? Now, peer reviews is the data that is basically being pulled into researcher ID by through our Publons interface. So if there's any data on Publons that a particular researcher has verified peer reviews, you'll see that these might be the records that are associated with you. We get this like data directly from the publishers, not from ORCID. Now, if there is a possibility to create peer review records on ORCID, which I'm really sorry, I'm not aware of, I'm afraid that this data won't be going automatically into the researcher ID, just because what we again, to the best of my knowledge, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the peer-reviewed data on ORCID, if it's there, it probably isn't verified by the publishers themselves. But again, please correct me if I'm wrong. What we have on the Web of Science researcher IDs is the verified peer review. So that's the data that's coming from the publishers that have confirmed that, yes, this person has peer-reviewed for us, and that's from the Publons peer review service. Thank you for the question. Is there anything else that anyone would like to ask? If you want, by the way, you can go off mute and ask your question verbally using the microphone. Are there any other questions? If your question is not just dedicated to Web of Science researcher profiles, but you would like me to run any particular search on Web of Science for documents, for example, we can also do that. So if you would like to just refresh any use case for the Web of Science itself or Web of Science core collection, I'm happy to do that for you. So please feel free to ask your questions. All right, I guess this means that there are no other questions. So let's do this. I'll definitely, first of all, thank you so much for finding your time and for joining this conversation today. It was really exciting to make this presentation for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to convert the slides that I've just been showing to you into a PDF, and I'll share it with all the attendees. We will also save the recording and also share it with the library so that the library can further share it with whoever didn't make it for today's conversation. And the last slide of the presentation will also contain my contacts. So in case there are still going to be any questions about Web of Science or Web of Science researcher profiles, or the integration between researcher profiles and ORCID, or even the researcher API and integration between the researcher IDs and any of your in-house systems, I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions that might occur afterwards. So as it always happens, a few minutes after the presentation, if you memorize any of the questions that you wish you've asked but you didn't, you can always do that later. So with that, I once again thank you for your time and for your interest and for your questions during today's conversation. And I'm wishing you a great continuation of this Tuesday. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye. This concludes our webinar, and you can log off. Thank you very much.